Welcome, believers. Welcome, conspiracy theorists. Welcome to the wonderfully weird world of the Tinfoil Hat Fan Club, where we talk about all the batshit crazy stuff that goes on in the world, and there's loads, right? So last week we covered the Berwyn Mountain UFO crash that I found really interesting, all right? Or, as people like to call it, the Welsh Roswell. Now, please, if you haven't, check it out. It's an interesting story, and at the same time, you could like and subscribe, couldn't you? Whee. Right, now, Wales is a hotspot for UFO sightings, even possibly a UFO base. So there's lots to cover. So today, I would like to tell you the story of the Pentrych UFO crash in South Wales, near Cardiff. Now, it is a really famous one. You probably have heard the story before, but it's for the people who haven't. Right, the people who are just getting into the scene. It's it's such a cool story, I have to tell you, right? So the story starts from February 2016 in a small town just outside Cardiff in Wales, right? The town is called Pentrych. Now, I'm going to put it on the map. There's the map of Pentrych, right? Now, the story is that a UFO crashed in a nearby woodland called Smilog Woods. Well, we say crashed. Apparently, it might have been shot down by military aircrafts. Now, this UFO story is probably the most important in UFO history, with witnesses, government cover-ups, etc., etc., etc. But what makes this story fascinating is that the fact the military seemed to know it was on its way. In other words, they had prior knowledge that this UFO event was going to happen, right? So, around 2 p.m, the people of Pentrych was woken up by the sound of military helicopters or low-flying aircraft. Also, bright lights or searchlights were attached to the helicopters. Some residents assumed that they were police search helicopters, because you would, wouldn't you? While some would swear that they watched some land in nearby fields, right? Some witnesses would swear that they weren't police vehicles, but Chinooks, twin engines, while others said they flew so low they shook their houses. So something was afoot, right? As more and more people peered outside from their homes, or even ventured from them into their yards, it was clear that there was more than just helicopters present outside. Many reported seeing multiple military vehicles on the ground, right? So something is definitely happening, right? Several hours later, when daylight stuck its head out, media outlets were informing their morning readers that the disturbance had been a military training drill involving both the Army and the Air Force. Apparently, right, the exercise was known or was called Chameleon, and that nothing untoward had taken place. Nothing untoward had taken place. Yes. Do we all believe what the government tell us? No, we do not, right? As we will turn our attention to next, there was plenty of people who flat out disagreed with the official explanation. Now, the biggest and most vocal witness was a woman called Kaz Clark, and she has wrote a book on the incident called The Pentrych Incident, the greatest UFO cover-ups of modern time, and I'll stick it there, right? So she would recall that after hearing all the commotion and the strange lights coming from the field behind her house, she stuck her head out to see what was going on. What she saw blew her mind, right? As she stood outside to see what was happening, she spotted a pyramid-shaped UFO moving overhead, right? So after witnessing the craft, she would state online, categorically state, that this was no exercise, and she had witnessed absolutely everything, and that was what was willing to take. She was willing to take a lie detector anywhere for anyone about it. Incidentally, she has, at the time of writing, taken 3 such lie detector tests. She's passed them all. She would further offer that the subject of the military intention was not a military aircraft, it was not training, but was a genuine UFO, an extraterrestrial craft from another world. So Kaz Clark, there she is going online to state she actually witnessed this UFO. She witnessed it. And, as we said before, she has taken 3 lie detector tests. So she's obviously telling the truth if these lie detector tests work. Hey, So anyway, as you can imagine, the police telephone was ringing off the wall, with people making reports in the hours following the strange, weird event. Now, Clark and her neighbour Dave, I love the name Dave. You know what I mean? Now, you probably don't. You may not know it, but there's a program called Only Fools and Horses, right? And Trigger used to call Rodney Dave, right? It's Dave. Anyway, sorry. Now, Clark and her neighbour Dave would state that the days before the event, a spotter plane was seen in the area. Now, a spotter plane in itself isn't weird, but according to Clark and Dave, this plane, when getting low on fuel, would be replaced by another, meaning that the area was constantly being monitored. Now that, I think, is strange, isn't it? In fact, so certain that something unusual was going on connected to the plane that she and Dave camped out in a field near where it was circling on the night of the 25th, going into the 26th of February. And you've got to be brave to do that in February because it was cold, right? It was as they were watching the plane that Clark first noticed the strange red light appearing over the trees. All right, so Clark also appeared in an episode of the television series Craig Charles UFO Conspiracy, and check that out. Check it out. I mean, I'm a big fan of Craig Charles. I like, obviously, Red Dwarf. I like that. And I like his DJing. The Craig Charles UFO Conspiracy isn't the best UFO program out there, but check it out. It's really interesting, right? Stating that there have been some military activity in the days leading up to the night of the incident itself. She told how she had ventured outside due to the military activity and then, with neighbours, made their way to the gate of a nearby field. As they approached, she offered the one red light had turned to 3 red lights, and they were like a pinnacle of an enormous pyramid ship. Even more amazing, she claimed that this object came through a black veil into our world, right? Suggesting that it arrived not from the reaches of space, at least how we might understand it, but from a portal or gateway. Now, fellow UFO researcher and investigator Gary Jones would also state that this thing came from a portal in the sky. Now, do you watch Skinwalker Ranch? Do you watch that? Have you watched it? Season 5 really did go into a portal type thing. They reckon they got them on Skinwalker. So portals, I mean, basically, they're interdimensional gateways into our world, aren't they? Right, so they're saying that this craft came through a portal. Now, when it was fully upright, Clark told how it fired a bright green object out of the top of it, like a big bright green star. So Dave and Clark carried on watching. Probably, I would imagine, too scared or curious to move. They even thought at one time that it was going to land. So she would state that while watching this weird otherworldly craft, she would recall seeing it eject a hand of lightning. Dave would state that he witnessed further multiple green orbs being ejected from the top. Now, Kaz Clark says that it emitted a bit of lightning off it. And it wasn't thin lightning, it was thick lightning. So just imagine a lightning bolt in the sky. That was what was coming off the craft. Now, was that static electricity from the port? You just don't know, do you, right? Now, at this point, 3 military helicopters arrived, flying extremely low to the ground. They passed over near where they were standing and were followed by 2 bizarre barrel-shaped silent objects that was approximately the size of a small car. These mysterious objects were red in colour and appeared to be moving, right? Like turning in on itself, right? These mysterious objects were red in colour and, as I say, appeared to be rotating on itself, with Clark elaborating that they appeared to be turning on itself like a cake mixture being stirred. That's a great analogy, isn't it, right? So you can now picture it. This is what these crafts were doing, right? Now, one of the red objects stopped only 20 feet away from where Clark was standing. Although she doesn't understand why she raised her hand and waved, she believed that while it was hovering there, it scanned her before moving away. Okay, incidentally, Clark would state her hair had turned white within 24 hours of the incident. Turned white within 24 hours, right? After witnessing the 2 red UFOs, Clark and Dave would snap out of their stunned fatigue and make their way home. And as they were doing so, a massive explosion ripped apart the night. The explosion was so loud, it woke people across the area, right? Now, interestingly, and this is important, the British Geological Survey data does confirm a seismological anomaly in the area at the time that Clark said the incident took place. So that does strengthen her case. Also, as well, remember she has taken 3 lie detectors, right? Now, this is where the story gets a bit sinister. And if you are a UFO fan or you follow the subject like I do, you can believe what happens next, all right? So the following morning, after Clark had posted her comments on social media, a mysterious person contacted her asking who she had spoke to and how did the communication go. Was it, i.e., face-to-face, telephone? Was it social media? Was it electronic communication? So she agreed to meet this bloke, right? And when she did meet up with this person, according to Clark's recollection of the meeting, she was asked bluntly if she was worried about what might happen to her and members of her family. She was even threatened with being involved in a fatal car accident. Now, it was obvious to Clark that rather than just being a person with an interest in the case, this strange and threatening person was directly connected to it. Was he a MIB? Was he a man in black? All right. Was he a government stooge? All right. And why were they trying to shut her up to a point where they threatened that she might have a fatal car accident? Right. Now, Clark would also explain why no photographs have been taken or video footage. She claimed that she and several other people tried, but all their phones were dead. And I can totally believe that. It seems a common issue with UFO sightings. Car batteries dies, cameras dies. They seem to drain the batteries, don't they, right? But whether this was a result of being in such a close proximity of the UFO itself, or whether it was a military plane. Now, the E3 Sentry, for example, that can lock phones in its immediate vicinity. All right, so you can't take photos. I did not know that, actually. So an E3 Sentry, right, if you're in close proximity to it, has got the ability to knock your phones out. That's interesting, isn't it, right? Now, Clark would state on the UFO conspiracy television show, the one we mentioned earlier with Craig Charles, that these things are real. Our military know they're real. And our military are actively pursuing and shooting these things down. And I totally buy that. I totally buy that. I'm 100% convinced that our military are aware of these things. Right? What worries me a little bit is why are you shooting them down, man? You know, I personally think they've probably got the technology to wipe us out if they wanted to. You know, like we're on about this craft apparently coming to Earth at the moment, aren't we? There's always a scare out there, isn't there, right? This craft coming to us now, worrying that it might be an alien invasion. They have been here for thousands of years. If they wanted to invade us, they would have done by now. All right, so, I mean, I might be wrong, obviously, but I don't think it's an alien invasion. Right, anyway, there were also other witnesses who were willing to speak to the media about what they had seen. Now, Mike Henbury, for example, claimed to have witnessed a red pulsating light before noticing 2 further lights that made a triangular formation. He would further state, like Clark, that orbs emerged from the craft, green and red, again green and red, and they moved as if they were dancing and moulding into one pulsation, red to green, slowly, right? So they're pulsing red to green and moulding into themselves. Fascinating, right? Other witnesses also noted that the object appeared out of nowhere, as opposed to flying from a distance. Once more, suggesting a connection to some kind of portal or interdimensional gateway. And that's worrying, that is, right? I mean, if they wanted to invade, they wouldn't be transversing that great big distance like the media are trying to tell you now. If that is true, they could just pop into our dimension straight away. Can you imagine with that power, if they all just popped into position all at the same time, we'd be doomed, right? So that's why I think they're not here to invade us. I don't know why they're here. It's a question I've asked for years. Why are they buzzing our air skies, right? Well, we don't know, do we? Now, with the arrival of the helicopters, the object moved towards the wooded area, with witnesses noticing through the leafless trees that the object was turning on its axis, as it appeared to be attempting to land. Then the lights went out. A short time later, the explosion rang out. So did the military shoot it down? Right, so Clark and some neighbours went around the area trying to copy the route of the strange craft, and what they found was 60-foot trees that had snapped in half. Once more, these snapped trees could be seen until your eyes ran out, right? It said, what could have snapped are hundreds of 60-foot trees? Obviously something large and travelling fast, I would suggest. Right, now they walked into the area of the damaged trees, eventually finding what they believed was the impact location. They could see numerous scrapings and strange white burn marks on the surrounding trees, as well as noticing an extremely pungent smell all around them. So, what we're basically saying then is, right, they went looking for this UFO, they followed its trajectory, and they found hundreds and hundreds of 60-foot trees snapped in half, right? And it went so long that you couldn't see the end of it, all right? So like we said, the only thing I could imagine that would do that is something fast, something large, and something heavy, right? Now, here's something that makes you think that something fishy's going on, right? A team of investigators turned up and set up camp near the crash site. They were using tech-top stuff for their investigation. She further recalls how they were doing a fingertip search of the field below the flight path of the pyramid-shaped UFO. Now, perhaps even more unnerving and interesting is that Clark would recall that if she walked past them, every one of them would stand up and watch you until you were out of sight. Even going on to describe, now this is Kaz Clark obviously, she described their behaviour as spooky and cult-like, right? Incidentally, radiation levels at the crash site have said to be as high as 1.2 EMF. Now the safe range is between 0.2 and 0.4. Once more, they remained that high until only very recently in 2021. So, what do you think, right? What do you think of this incident? Now, the cover-up story the government bodies are going for is that this was a military exercise, okay? But the crash site is very near a hospital, and the hospital is called the Royal Glamorgan Hospital, where an on-duty nurse had claimed that she heard an extremely loud explosion, and it sounded as if it was coming from right outside the hospital. And this was like round about 2 a.m. on the night in question. Right, now bear in mind this is right by a hospital. The nurse continued that there was a second explosion a short time afterwards, although this sounded a little further away. Now, perhaps of even more intrigue was that after venturing outside following the explosion, there was a smell of sulphur all around. Now, we might recall that Kaz Clark claimed that she was confronted with an unpleasant smell at the apparent crash site. You know, all these trees that have been shut up, smashed in half. And also, we know that the aroma of sulphur is mentioned in many close encounter UFO reports. All right, so the government cover-up, all right? The nurse would ultimately state that they didn't believe it was a military exercise, and added that on the night in question, she noticed that all roads in the local area were closed. As there was only a very small police force in the village, the increased police presence suggested that officers were brought in from other regions, and that, as Clark claimed, would suggest some kind of prior knowledge to the event of the 26th of February 2016. So what they're saying basically is they got police in before the incident happened. Right, so they must have known something was on its way. Now, Kaz Clark's research offers further witnesses to the strange event in question. She would discover that almost all of the patients at the Royal Glamorgan Hospital were awakened in their beds. Of more concern, thick black smoke, presumably from the crash site, was going in through the vents and through the windows of the building. So, if you were going to have a military operation, you wouldn't have it near a hospital, would you? Now, a man named Gary Jones made a Freedom of Information request about the incident on the 23rd of February 2018. And in his request, Jones stated that he required information on the events of the 25th and 26th of February, when the military was conducting an exercise named Chameleon, and the information he had from local residents that the area around the Small Log Woods was shut down and blocked off. So he's trying to get a Freedom of Information Act, right, to find out why. He would continue that public footpaths and entrances to Small Log Wood were blocked, as were a number of other roads leading to the area for several hours, adding that during this time people also reported hearing large explosions and witnessing smoke from the area. Now, ultimately, Jones asked 4 specific questions in the FIO request, right? Freedom of Information request. Why was Small Log Woods closed to the public during the 25th and 26th of 2016? Right? What exactly is the reason for the military being in Small Log Woods during this time, the 25th and 26th, 2016? Was the authority, whose authority was it to close the woods to the public? Right, so that's the third. And why were the roads closed down in the area around Small Log during this time? Right? Now, it turns out that he did get an answer a month later saying it stated there was no permission granted to the military to close the woodland and public paths and let off explosives in the woodlands mentioned during these dates, or in fact any dates, so we have no record, adding that this type of activity would have required permission. So that would suggest that the story the military were on a training exercise is either a big fat whopping lie or bloody illegal, right? So Jones's Freedom of Information would also ask what was the green lights witnessed that night and what was the explosion. He never got a straight answer, but just a runaround, basically. Ultimately, they would acknowledge that something did happen that night. They do so in the indirect way by stating that the information fell into Section 26 category, which means it is not in the public interest. Essentially, it's classified, right? So they are admitting that something happened, but they're using Section 26 to say, yeah, but we can't tell you, right? Now, as Jones stated, this section allows the military to sweep it all underneath the covers, right? Can't tell you, man. Now, they know people have seen the events of that night, and a military exercise right by a hospital with no permission to do so seems highly unlikely, doesn't it, right? So, the Pentrych incident, if we cover it briefly again, Kaz Clark definitely witnessed something. Other people witnessed stuff. There was an explosion right by the hospital. All right, so it couldn't have been a military exercise because, mate, they wouldn't be allowed to do that. It was so close to the hospital that smoke came in through the vents and the windows. It woke all the passengers up. It set cars off in the car park. So something definitely crashed. And because it's on a Section 26, you're never going to find out. So I am going to say that was definitely a UFO. All right, now we know Wales is a UFO hotspot. And apparently there is a military base there. Sorry, a UFO base, not a military base, a UFO base in the sea off the Wales coastline, right? So, what do you think? I am buying this story 100%. I generally do think it was a UFO, and I do think it was shot down. The porthole thing freaks me right out, but it's not the first time we've heard it. So what sort of technology have they got where they can come through a wormhole? Staggering. Right, so this was the Tinfoil Hat Fan Club. I hope you enjoyed the story, because I do. I love it. I love this story. And if you have heard it before, thanks for sticking around and listening to me waffle on about it, right? So, Tinfoil Hat Fan Club, I appreciate you sticking around. Please like, subscribe, and follow my YouTube channel. That would be fantastic. And I'll see you next week. Thanks very much.